these are great conversations. Who is just completely ready to do this, has this nailed, wants to be the person to go first? Or persons, I guess there'll be a pair of you. Corey, you going to go? Okay. Would you please, you're going to conference back there by the Yeti, which is that giant microphone on the table, so that Judy can have it on. Corey and Ron? Oh, okay. He said Ron's over here already hedging. There's no guarantees. There's no guarantees.
What's that?
It was a pop quiz. Are you ready for this? Okay, so just background for the rest of you that didn't do this particular lesson. This is a lesson done by a middle school teacher on citizenship. We got it. We got it. We're all friends here. Am I ever any other way? I just want to.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, you may.
Prior to Ron coming into my classroom, correct?
Yeah.
So this is all my thinking of what I'm going to do and why I did it,
This
correct?
is like Ron came into you and he said, Corey, I think this is a world-class lesson. This is what I'm going to teach, but I want to talk to you about it before I do it.
Yep, perfect.
Okay? All right, here we go.
And we're somewhere in between the two of those. Corey, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing real well, Mr. Peterson. Thanks. I'm kind of nervous and excited, so thanks.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. How's your family going?
My girls are great. It's busy, a lot of soccer going on.
Good.
But I'm able to spend a lot of time after they go to bed because my girls are young. So then I, really work on these plans and put them together and so get up early and come into school and do that sort of thing.
Good. Well, I'm not going to waste your time or mine, so I'm going to get right down to this. So I want you to feel free to ask me any questions. But with that said, now has he had the lesson yet or not?
No, he's going to.
Okay. So I've taken a look at your pre-conference notes that you submitted 24 hours previously, and I've got a few questions that I'm going to go ahead and ask about those. But first of all, so instead of telling me how the lesson went, tell me what you're trying to accomplish on this lesson.
Yeah. Here's my thinking. As I start going backwards, the importance of kids understanding citizenship and why it was set up in the past and setting up a new country, that purpose, and where we are now. Has it changed in our lives to bring in new people and have a naturalization process? Do we even get what that encompasses, what they have to go through, what things we have to instill in that knowledge? And then start asking them to reinvent that as groups and working collaboratively to say, how should that look for the 21st century? Are there things that have endured the times? Are there new things with technology? You look at the different ethical things going on within stock market investing and those things, say, what is it to be a citizen nowadays and what do we need to change for a future citizen?
Okay.
And then most importantly, I want them to persuade that in their groups and get other people to believe in what they're saying. So they have to sell their ideas to get the rest of the class to believe in it. So that's kind of the gist of the whole.
Okay. So, let's stay on that same theme. So, is you're going to have the kids sell, as you said. How are you going to engage kids in this from the very get-go? How are you going to get them, for the kid that doesn't know what you're talking about? Are we talking about just the United States? Are we talking about an African child?
Yeah. I think that's the piece that I've got to make sure that I make it connecting to them so they understand what it really takes. What's the criteria to become a citizen? What's the process? And having that background knowledge, but then be able to make it exciting and engage it to their lives so they actually get it and can use it. So what I'm going to try to do is have some activities where they really get to go through some video activities, some information, some background knowledge, and start thinking about what it means to actually become a naturalized citizen, what's that process. So that way they can apply to say, if that's what people had to do and still have to do, are there changes that we need to look at for the future? So I really wanted to connect to their lives. And then I started thinking, as I developed my rubric, I already thought of an idea that I want to try to do. So some of my professional growth is, I'm trying to figure out how I can scaffold and individualize for each student. So I might even give criteria like, Something that I haven't put in here, I just want to see if I can. Maybe they can get into different groups where they're looking at different areas that citizen impacts. Information technology, how we get into stock market ethics, how we talk about legal ethics, what's it mean in your personal life, what's it look like in your business life. And then maybe students could take that recreating, that reinventing, that creative process, creating a new process, but they create something that they have to have. So working in collaborative groups, but then they have to know what's your personal citizenship look like, what's a business citizenship, and they have to actually apply it in their own world, so I can see if you actually get it versus you. Sometimes in a collaborative group, you don't know who did what, so that they actually have a basis of knowledge. I can assess their own individual piece and growth, but then more importantly, see how their group can interact it together and sell it to the group. So I'm actually going to have them rewrite their rubric. So if they choose a business piece, maybe they have 8 or 10 different choices, it lets them kind of create where they want to go. Then they create that rubric based off of the one I have back here on how to present it out, and they give me an individualized group. So in the future, I can even have better rubrics, and I can tweak them a little bit and have a better rubric for each individual's knowledge and basis on top of the whole presentation piece. That's kind of, I'm not there quite yet, but I think that's where I want to go.
It sounds like from our previous conversation in our PLC days that you've incorporated a lot of the 21st century skills. Is there a specific area that you're focusing on in that area? It sounds like you have a lot going on in this lesson. Is there anything specifically that you're going to that these kids are going to walk away with and say, that's what Mr. Wise wanted me to learn today?
Yeah. Again, this is a civics class, so therefore we're looking at that piece of what it means to be a citizen. So that's a number one. With that, though, I want to connect it to the 21st century skills of financial literacy, because I think you look at the ethics piece of what it means. So I think part of becoming a citizen, we have to look at our own personal responsibility. I think I want to get into that side of health and wellness. I think you could tie in naturally with that piece. And so as we start looking at those individual areas, how we tie that back to a specific, say, 21st century criteria. So what I really want to hit this right now is not so much of a global awareness, but it does bring in the idea that people are coming from another country and then adapting to what we consider to be a citizen and understanding that piece. But I think some of those other categories of the civic responsibility, financial literacy, are definite focuses, and then information technology. As they present, they have to use that technology in which to present it. So that's probably one that I'm really trying to purposely integrate.
Okay. What will I see in the classroom to know the kids are getting it along the way?
Yeah.
As far as the checks to where, you're talking about some big large items, and you even mentioned the word financial literacy.
I think one of the things I want to do is have purposeful writing in every class. Since I'm a social studies teacher, I really want to make sure they have purposeful writing in every class. So how we look at that formative assessment piece, having an exit ticket, and if the first day is building up that background knowledge of what it means and going through the naturalization process, have an exit ticket to write to that piece.
Okay.
Or have some posters posted around the wall to where I'm asking kids to put where they're at and give a question towards that. And even if it's just like a gist, a 20-word summary of what it is, I can get kind of where they're at and kind of keep going and tweak them to better resources to find. I have a little bit of a library for each criteria, but I probably need to have a bigger library. So maybe through this process, I'm getting a bigger library where kids are able to get better background knowledge in certain areas.
Now, will you have this same class earlier in the day or after this?
Yeah, I teach at 5 of my 6 classes.
And this falls where? This falls?
Well, you're going to come in 3rd period.
Okay.
So I've already taught at 2nd. I have first hour off since I'm department chair.
Okay. So, all right. Well, we'll see after this. I guess, Corey, what do I need to know coming into this classroom that have been those enduring questions that are carryovers that this, first of all, that I ought to be able to hear or see from the students right away? Where am I with that?
Yeah. First and foremost, when you come in, it's really going to be that they should be able to define what it is to be a citizen and the difference between naturalization and a natural citizen and naturalized citizenship, and understand that process and what it takes and how to go through it. So really that background information is the key thing. And then more importantly, where we're transitioning in their groups is that individually they can start to reinvent. I think my key thing is that they're reinventing So they're creating something, and how they have their individual knowledge to be able to actually apply it to a better idea and not just kind of re-say it is going to be the key piece that I have to push.
Okay.
Okay, I think we can call it.
Good.
Probably go on for a while, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I would like to say one last thing. I would like to say one last thing that I think has been very beneficial when we were having the conversation. The importance of this, number one, is to make you a better teacher, obviously for the kids to learn better. I mean, that's our goal, okay? I hope when I see this lesson that we can take and improve from this lesson. Do you have any problem, or I guess what I'm going to tell you is that if time allows in this class, since we have an hour and 50-minute classes, that I'm going to take the end of the period and get direct feedback from students. And you're welcome to stay in the classroom and not stay in the classroom. It's my experience that I prefer that you be out of the classroom so kids can give me honest feedback, and I'll be asking them 2 questions. One question will be, quite honestly, what does Mr. Wise really do well that you like? And the other one, what can I share with him that would, what feedback can I give back to Mr. Wise that would allow you to learn better? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay,
I
well,
think,
if you aren't, it's okay, because I'm going to do it anyway.
well, I'll say this, going through this and thinking about what I'm doing and why and having to explain it to you ahead of time,
Right.
surely it sure makes me think about what I'm doing and that process of where I'm getting
Yeah.
kids. I think it's important you find out where kids are at.
Yeah. Well, I can't say it on film.
All right, let's give him a hand. Corey did. You knew the lesson well.
That's what we want to do is really focus on standard one, just outcomes, so that you didn't have to, but I love Corey's comment about I'm having them create something, and that is a really important piece of what's in that stage 3 about the lesson, is that it's not just knowing what naturalization is, knowing what citizen is, they have to actually use that information to create a new process that makes better sense in this day and age, so.
The thing I'll say though, I think that was the attempt in this. I'm not so sure that this would actually get them to that point. So as a teacher, I'm taking this to where I'd want it to go on that level, but as I'm reading this, the reinventing piece, all it goes to is that persuasive speech, rather than truly creating something off of a criteria and using different things. So I kind of took it
Yeah,
on my
I
own.
don't disagree with that, and I think that one thing that happened on this lesson is that in stage 3 in particular, it's too prescriptive. I'm just going to cut right to the chase and say I think it's too prescriptive. In fact, I said right to this teacher, I said, I really like a lot of the things you've done here, but what if you took all of these, we're all going to watch this movie, and we're all going to read this, and we're all going to do this, and put it in a Google Doc, and said to your kids, look, here's the expectation that you create blah, 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 and here's the rubric that goes with it. And by the way, I created this Google site, and you're welcome to use all these materials or any other materials that you want. And go for it, because we have to break free of that paradigm that every kid in the room needs to sit here and watch this movie with me. You know, they probably don't. It definitely, 50% of them probably don't. So I agree with you, there were some inherent concerns throughout, but a good attempt at a very new paradigm. So she wants to direct them to a flipped classroom. Ashley does, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to turn, I have to go. I have a radio show I do at 3, so I can't miss that, so I have to go. But Chris is going to finish, and I think that all the things you guys we have planned will be valuable and important, and hopefully we can get done in time. We'll see. Tiffany will still be here too. We'd like to do 2 of the secondary ones and 2 of the elementary ones if we can fit that in, and then we have another thing for you to do. So, Chris.
The other thing, and just a kind of a prelude, Corey, I don't know if you did this on purpose or not, but start thinking about that stage 2 piece. You said you were going to actually have the students create their own rubric, but you said it was based on a rubric you'd already created that they could measure them against. That's one of the pitfalls to moving on to stage 2, is that normally you'll see in these plans going to create a rubric. That's not satisfactory. Creating the rubric and including it in the plan is, and that sounded like what you had done. So just a little taste of where we're going to go next after this. Did you guys want to step up, or should we go to elementary? You felt like they did a good job? Yeah, nice. Pass it. All right, elementary. I know it's hard. Following the Ron Peterson, Corey Wise combo, All right. We have a volunteer. All right, Ty's going to be the principal. Who's going to be the teacher? All right, boys. It's the male review today. Hey, Ty, do you want to give everybody a sense for the secondary folk who didn't read the Monster Pen?
I didn't read the monster too much. We really focused on the questions to get to the lesson.
All right.
I did last week.
He did.
This was a unit by an art teacher focusing on pen skills using the theme of monsters. So,
I think we came up with some pretty good questions to guide us through the site standard one.
Right. And the audience that I would be working with are 7th and 8th grade students, and we're working on the elements of art. Students is skillfully using techniques associated with elements and principles to create a quality project. Students create neat and organized and clean projects. And student is able to demonstrate critical thinking is evident in using the sketchbook to plan and problem solve, and in completing midpoint and final critiques.
Good morning.
How you doing, Mr. Muma?
Good, how are
I
you?
sure am.
Mr.
Glad you're going to
McQueen.
spend some time with me.
Yes.
You know what? I just love you. God, you've done such a great thing for this school.
Thank you.
All right.
Here we go. Let's just get into it.
Okay.
I've been in your classroom a lot so far, and so I know your style, but I definitely want to bring to light some of the questions I'll have, that we should consider together
Great.
as we go forward.
forward
First of all, how do the learning outcomes incorporate the Douglas County School District, GVCs, and the world-class skills?
Well, Mr. Muma, I've reviewed the national standards
Okay.
around art, and I've been trying to get my head wrapped around the Common Core standards. As it pertains to the world-class outcomes for the Douglas County schools, I'm a little gray in that area, but
Have you had the opportunity to look those up and kind of look at the
a
big
lot of people
ideas?
have been talking about them.
Okay.
I understand they're going to be excellent. I'm really looking forward to working more deeply with those. So what I've been doing is just really focusing on the national standards, and I know that I've got to make sure that I have work that the students produce that has characteristics of different two-dimensional and three-dimensional aspects. I have to do drawing and some painting pieces, and I want to make sure that I also bring in art. Kids have to have choice and creativity.
Well, that's an area we can continue to explore together
Excellent.
and look at those a little more closely, the GVCs. Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Tell me this, what student learning objectives and learning outcomes are the focus of this lesson? And what will students learn, and how will it transfer into other content areas? I know you're an art teacher, but it's nice to see how they might be able to extend this into their other content areas in their classrooms.
Well, it's a great question. I really I'm hoping that the students can produce line and just paint products that represent some of their creativity and innovation, some critical thinking skills. I'd like to make sure that they are taking some background knowledge from things that they've read, some other things that they've experienced in their own life, some things that they see as they're, interacting with their own day-to-day life. So I would hope that would be able to relate well to other content
Transfer
areas.
over into the
I
content.
haven't done much talking with other
Sure.
teachers about it, but I would hope that would be something that would be an outcome. I would like to maybe have some opportunities to talk to other teachers about how I could help support some of their learning, because I think that art can find its way into
Definitely.
lots of other curricular areas.
Definitely. Okay, thank you, Alan. How were the objectives established, and what data and sources informed your selection for this lesson?
Well, that's a good question.
In other words, how will this fall on the learning continuum? How does this fit in to what they've learned previously and where you're going now with it?
Well, I know that I want them to draw, and they're going to produce a painting. So, that's a great question. I'm going to have to think about that.
We'll come back to it. How's that sound?
You know what?
After
If
the
you can
lesson.
give me a chance
Yeah.
to revisit
Ponder
that,
that.
because, how it all ties together is something that I'm wrapping my head around.
Okay, so now you're doing the lesson in the classroom. How will students demonstrate what they've learned? How will the learner outcomes incorporate the development of their creative skills? And you talked a little bit about that.
Well, they'll be able to actually show their end portfolio.
Okay.
I do have them capture all of their work in their own journals and portfolios, but usually I'm the one that interacts with it. I think you're alluding to maybe having them have to share their learning or products with others, and I think that's a great idea. I've in the past done a lot of things like galleries and opportunities for kids to showcase those, but not necessarily all students.
Right. And the nice thing, and I've kind of picked this up in your lesson, is students can demonstrate their learning in different ways, and there's not one way to do the project.
Absolutely, and that's what's
created.
the best thing about art.
Okay.
Everything can be beautiful.
You bet. During your lesson, Alan, what instructional strategies are you going to use, and how will this incorporate development of communication and collaboration skills?
Well, as you can see in the plan that I prepared, I'll model the lesson, and then the students are going to do some pair share, and they're going to discuss some of the elements that they are expecting to put into their work, and then glean some ideas from others.
Okay.
So that that's the way they were going to lead into the instruction. But we also I would like to have them review each other's work as it's progressing,
Okay.
so that they can critique. I've got a couple of pieces in my plan here about how they can do a mid-project critique and a final critique, both in a group and with me.
How will you evaluate that quality of conversation that those students are having with one another?
It's probably a great idea to have a rubric.
There you go.
So maybe
But you
that's
haven't created one yet.
No,
That's
as
a
a matter of
shame.
fact, I unfortunately I haven't created a rubric to check the quality of their dialogue.
Okay.
But I could see how that could be beneficial.
Tell me a little bit how you're going to differentiate for the different needs in your classroom, and how are you going to challenge some of those experts you have in your classroom?
Well, I've basically built my plan around a 7th grade unit and an 8th grade unit.
Okay.
So as long as I'm working with the 7th graders in 7th grade and there's not an 8th grader in there, I think I'm going to be fine.
Do you have any students that struggle in the classroom that you might need to work a little more closely with?
Well, I hope that all of their counterparts in elementary schools have prepared them well. But no, I think that there are obviously students that have more talent in art, more natural ability.
Sure.
But I'm definitely going to have to consider what I do about students that may already have success with the skills we're teaching, or ones that can't address it. But I didn't capture it yet in my plan, but I sure would like to visit with you on how to do that better.
Okay. Let's talk about as you think about this lesson that you're going to teach, what might be some misconceptions that the students might hold that might prohibit them from being successful in this unit?
Well, there are students that I work with that don't feel like they're good artists. But obviously, since all art is beautiful, I know that they are. There's an inner artist in every child.
Sure.
And so that's definitely going to be a consideration that I'm going to have to overcome and help them find their inner artist.
Okay. Thank you. Couple more questions, Alan, as we go forward.
You're really helping me change some of my planning and thinking. I appreciate this.
Thank you. How will the learner outcomes incorporate the development of their critical thinking skills?
Another great question there, Mr. Newman. Again, I want to make sure that they pay close attention to the different elements and principles of art, and I have them displayed around the room. I want to make sure that they are using all of these elements, because I know they're listed in the standards, but as far as how critically they're thinking through this process, I'm going to have to get some ideas on that. I'd like
Possibly
to,
posing some questions, allowing them to
Ooh.
problem solve, not just providing all the answers to them, but posing some really thoughtful questions that will allow them to go a little bit deeper
That's
with their
excellent.
thinking as they create this.
That's excellent. I think that's a
Project.
great strategy.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll go on with that. How will the learner be assessed in your class with this? And formative, summative, what are you looking at? And what methods will be used during the lesson to check for their understanding of the skills that you're teaching them?
Sure. So when they begin their project, they talk amongst themselves, and then they come and counsel with me, and we dialogue around what they're going to actually create. So there's going to be some formative assessment that happens there, kind of what aspects of the principles of art they're going to include in this project. Then there's the mid critique and the final critique. And then at the end, obviously, they'll have a summative score. I also would like to incorporate a little bit of the peer conversation that you had asked about, but I don't have a way for them to score that yet.
Okay. When will that be developed?
Well, I'm going to have to say after our lesson. I'd like to hear what you have to say about what you see, and then I'll come up with some strategies.
And we can work together on that.
Excellent.
Well, I look forward to coming in. Do you have any questions for me? Anything you want me to particularly look for while I'm in your classroom?
I've got a couple of kids that aren't always on task.
Mhm.
So if you could help me with some strategies, they're easily distracted.
Have you put anything into place up to this point with those students?
Well, I've been talking to some of the other specialists,
Sure.
about what they're seeing in their classrooms, and it seems like there's some consistency there. I'd really like that new light box. So I think if you could see that I could do a lot with the light box.
Yeah.
So
We'll
let me
talk
know.
more about that. You might have some opportunities to get
Okay.
that if you do a good job.
Thanks.
All right, take a look at the rubric. What'd you like? What do you see?
Question, because I think this is where we were getting, Elizabeth and myself were getting hung up on. Per this template, we've been passing all along to focus on the learning and understanding first. And so, then my question, I don't know, initially might be with the teacher. We had written down, what is the umbrella idea that frames and engages the learner of the unit to get to the enduring understanding first? But this template, so I think the difficult time that I had when I was reviewing it is that I keep thinking stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and this template doesn't lend itself to that as much. So I'm glad that they've reworked it, but when we look at these plans, we need to dig to the meat of it. And there's no enduring understanding. in it.
You're right, and we shouldn't be hung up on a template. You shouldn't be advocating. You should be allowing teachers to work through it, given the framework. The whole idea, look at it. Are outcomes clearly identified right off the bat? She's identified outcomes. Are they the right ones? No. No. So, that's probably where you start sinking in.
And that's what we were initially going to talk about, and then I was going to guide her towards, the essential questions on where is the, how is the lesson integrated, and then kind of go that way. But, I had to start with, what is your enduring understanding first?
What other observations do you have just from looking at it?
Well, my question was, obviously, outcomes are not real fast. So I wanted, to me, there's no point going any further with it because
The outcomes aren't world-class, so there's no point even concentrating on the rest of it because it's all flawed from its conception. So until the outcome changes, you can't really support the teacher in the assessments or the learning activities because you don't have a good outcome. But if you were to work with this teacher in a conference before an observation, this is where it's problematic for me. She's going to go, her whole lesson is not going to work. The whole thing is, do you postpone it and say, why don't you go home, do some thinking about these outcomes after you kind of do some coaching? Because otherwise she goes home and the lesson's going to fall apart the next day because she's trying to rework a lesson without enough time to do you see where I'm going with the whole thing?
Yeah.
Is so do you postpone the conference at that point and say you really need to really go back after you work with her some and rewrite these outcomes,
What's more important?
the outcomes?
Yeah. So give
But
them
I
time.
just wondered if it's a pre-conference conversation, then just
Yeah. What?
so maybe those pre-conference yeah.
I think what you're dealing with. Can anyone figure out how this teacher created this backwards plan? Yeah. She went into her bag and pulled out one of her best tools and plugged it into this template. So she was trying to figure out what outcomes were based on this great activity I have with monsters. So that I've used every year for the past 10 years and I know kids love. Yeah. So that's probably, so you know the lesson is going to be probably a lesson that she's done several times, but she doesn't understand the importance of identifying what those outcomes should have been to start. So she was building a backwards plan. So yeah, so that's where the learning has to go. So
Sometimes do we have these pre-observation conferences a week before their lesson to make sure they've got to go back and tweak and they have that time? I mean,
no, because if you look at it, stage 3 is probably going to be a deliverable. She just doesn't get the idea of what the overarching big understanding is going to be. It's a separate learning point for her. You're still going to see probably a high quality lesson, but she has no idea of how it links globally.
That's where you do the professional development.
Yes, exactly. And the conference is getting that teacher to understand that that's what needs to happen and to take ownership for it. Great.
and Chris, I don't know what the lesson was, but
But I just have two comments. One is I want to be careful that we don't overthink this and recognize it's really not, I mean, we're there to serve as a support and a guide, but it's really our teachers that are going to be carrying the heavy load here. And so many times I think just by asking the questions that it's getting people to think more about outcomes. And I mean, I feel like when I come in here sometimes I don't know anything. Don't say anything, Ron. And that I don't know what I'm doing. But then when I step back for a minute and I recognize the conversations that we're having already this year, they're so much better than they've ever been before. And really focusing people on what it is we want kids to be learning in our classrooms. So, you know, I just think sometimes with these we overthink it, and maybe we don't need quite as much time to work on it as you give us, because then we start overthinking it.
Okay, we can adjust that.
Also, as this lesson goes on, I mean, as you go into the classroom and observe this lesson, whether you're videoing it or just taking your notes or whatever, but having that opportunity to have those conversations, like, yeah, this, sometimes I think people need to kind of bomb a little bit in order to get the big idea and say, wow, that didn't go so well. Let's talk about that, you know, and then you can really dig in on those enduring understandings and those critical questions that they should be asking prior to their lesson.
Very good. The purpose of these, the K-12 this year, have been to help you develop the skills to evaluate this component, this backwards design, all right? Learning how to build a backwards plan is being offered in other areas and through other opportunities like next Monday, Tuesday. And if you're in Change Agent, you're getting a lot of development in terms of building backwards design. You are evaluators. You have to be able to take these and be very critical and then communicate to the staff on their development. So that was how this rubric was developed, and that was the purpose of today. Drew. Yep. Yes, and I'll tell you, I think in order to be a good evaluator, you also have to have a great understanding of building it yourself. So I don't think you can have one or the other. We've just tackled them in different lenses. All right, we are going to finish with an activity. I ask you to stay a little bit longer. We're going a little over time. We're moving on now to Standard 2, which is Stage 2, which is the assessment piece. There are 3 components of this. There's the formative, there's the interim, and there is the summative. They are basically in the site rubric 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. All right? We're going to do a little activity. We're going to give you an opportunity to work through a list at your own pace of an actual backwards plan, and you have to identify whether it is formative assessment that's implied in this, interim assessment, summative, whether it belongs in Stage 1, Stage 3, or it's none of that. All right? We're going to do it through the clickers, and I'm going to let Tiffany explain.
Okay, guys, so I'm bringing around a handout, the same handout that's in Edmodo. It's the classification activity, so if you're okay with watching it, looking at the questions on your computer, you can do it that way as well. I don't have any copies of the questions. But as a backup, you can find it in Edmodo. Thanks.
You want to give me some of those? I'll pass them out too.
Okay, so you guys are going to get the list, and as Chris was mentioning, it's got the kind of the options for your answers are at the top, and they're alphabetical multiple choice, A, B, C, D, E, F. And then underneath are some directions. So I'm going to walk you guys through. It's very quick on the use of the clickers to do this. We're going to go at your own pace because doing 25 of these all as a whole group, as we learned this summer, takes quite a bit of time. So if you guys can grab your clicker and push the power button on the bottom of the clicker, it's the blue one on the bottom, you should see it turn on. In just a moment, I'm going to go ahead and start the assessment. And if you guys watch the screen, does everybody have their clicker on? Okay, just want to double check because they need to be on before I start. Okay, so I'm going to start. If you look on the screen of your clicker, you guys should see it's going to start making a few changes. It'll say clear answers and something else will happen, and then it'll say receiving, I think. And then you'll get a thing that says Q1 that pops up. Okay, so what that means is you are currently putting in your answer for statement number 1 on the page. So the first one says that all leaders will rate themselves on the rubric. Using Edmodo, tables will consolidate the data to create a class baseline. Okay, so that's the statement. Would you classify that statement as A, a formative assessment, B, an interim assessment, C, a summative, D, a stage 1 activity stuff, is it stage 1 stuff, E, stage 3 stuff, or F, none of the above? So what you're going to do, you're going to use the big blue letters, not the little ones on your clicker, but the big blue ones to put in your answer. So go ahead and choose A, B, C, D, E, or F. Once you have your answer in, you're going to use the blue button on the top right that looks like a kind of like a left-hand turn. You're going to use that one to send your answer in. Blue one on the right, yep, the one that looks like a right angle sign. Your screen should now say Q2, right? So that means that you're putting in your answer for question number 2. Just a couple of little hints for you guys as you go along. The button to the left of the send, so the blue button on the top left of your clicker, that's delete. So if you actually put 2 A's in, you need to delete one of them, use that button on the left. And the top 2 arrows, the black arrows on the right and left at the very top of your clicker, those will move you forward and backward through your question. So let's say you get to statement number 7, and whatever you read there makes you change your mind about statement number 2. You can use those black arrows at the top to go back to question number 2, delete it, and change your answer. Okay? So I'm here to help you guys. If you come, hit any roadblocks with your clicker, let me know. I'll come along and help you out. But you just put in the answer, send, and it should kick you forward to the next one. Use the Q and whatever number is behind it to tell you which question you're putting in.